Hey Acers, glad to be back together with you again today. This is the Ace Role Playing Games channel, and I'm Mason Emerson, your host. And these are just raw takes that I do in my basement office as I each week try and share my thoughts and experiences with the Savage Worlds role playing game. As I'm going to continue to give you more about the rules, but I want to want to go ahead and move on from, we've just covered the basic rules and the situational rules. We kind of maybe have a feel of how to run the game. I even gave you a couple of videos with example parts in it, and I hope you found those helpful. So now let's move into allies. Now this is from the next section of the book called Adventure Toolkit. Adventure Toolkit, first of all, maybe I should touch on that a little bit. It is a section that has tools that you as a game master can use that will make it so it's easier in certain situations for you to be able to keep the story flowing. Because Savage Worlds is a cinematic role-playing game, and it is one of those games that is very helpful when you can just kind of ignore the bean counting and keep the story flowing. And sometimes one of the biggest things that I've experienced in other role-playing games is that as the game master, you're controlling all the characters that aren't the player characters. And those are the allies and the antagonists and the animals and the nature and the whole rest of the world. And it can get kind of cumbersome. And especially when you have sidekicks and villagers that are helping out the heroes, or maybe you're controlling rules for a mass battle or something like that, which that is in the Adventure Toolkit. That is mass battles is one of the ones that I will get to as part of this series, in this sub-series of Simply GM. And so let me just kind of give you a quick overview of the sections we're going to cover, and then we'll get to allies. So we will cover allies, chases and vehicles, and dramatic tasks. That's a big key subsystem, is dramatic tasks. You guys are going to like this one. Fear and how to handle that overwhelming terror. Hazards, interludes, which is another subsystem of Savage Worlds that can also help you, especially if you're running a one-shot, or even if you're not running a one-shot, that you give your players a chance to have a moment. And you can weave interludes in anywhere in your story, and it helps a lot. You can do mass battles, like I said. And this is one place where I really give my friends at Pinnacle a huge, just well done, you guys. And that is that there was a system that popped up in Deadlands Noir, which is this one right here. Yeah. And it's the one that got me back into not only role-playing gaming, but Savage Worlds. And this is a really hard book to find, incidentally. You can get it in PDF, though. Pinnacle still has it in PDF. And this, I think I've talked a bit about it, and I'll get back to the list in just a second, but I wanted to kind of point this out to you, is that there is a setting rule in here, or a thing in here about interrogations and the results of interrogations, or pattern, or things like that. These detective work rules from the original Deadlands Noir, they got incorporated into Deadlands, or into Savage Worlds itself, and they took those original ideas and they made it so they took the original ideas and they made it so it was part of the core rules, because someone had come up with it along the way after Deluxe was published, and it actually made sense, and so they've incorporated it in, and then that's now called networking. And if, incidentally, I just have to go on this little tangent for Deadlands Noir again. Making mysteries, this section here, starting on page 73, is one of the best encounter generators best story generators I have ever seen in any role-playing game book. I would go as far as to say that even just if you're doing it random and doing like a D6 for the hook, and then a D10 for the event that you're investigating, and and a D8 for your perpetrator, and let's see, a D6 for your motive, and then a D10, or you roll a D6 to determine how many clues of evidence you get, and then you roll a D10 to find out what kind of evidence they're finding. There's also optional locations that are specific to New Orleans, but you can put in the locations of your own city. So they're like maybe 7 locations, and then an 8th one that's kind of a fun one. And then you can even throw in an optional twist. There's like 6 different options for that. And then there's even sub options for some of those twists and everything. And it's a really great adventure generator. It could generate something that could generate years of play. So let me put that back real quick. And that's why I recommend finding some of these older properties, or maybe even getting the PDF of Deadlands Noir and getting it just for that adventure generator, because you can use that adventure generator with any of the settings, with any role-playing game. It is so tight. It is so well done. If you want to generate a mystery of some sort, get the Savage Worlds Deadlands Noir. It is really cool. So continuing on, there is a section in here on setting rules. And like I said, networking was one of the setting rules. Oh, I missed mentioning quick encounters. That's another subsystem of Savage Worlds. Helps you when you get in that corner of you've let your players play, and it's been good role play, and it's been good interactions, and now you only have about 15 minutes left before your game has to end, so you can clear off so that the next group can come in and start getting ready. So you run a social conflict, you run a quick encounter. So yeah, like I said, then there's the setting rules. There's a rules on social conflict. And social conflict, I also have to take another little tangent on at this point, and I'll really get into it when we get there. But role-playing games almost always have combat rules. And combat rules are great. They allow for our characters to be wise about fighting and be able to do fighting things which we maybe ourselves are not able to do. Well, social conflict rules are rules that can be engaged to do social type interactions, like a lawyer. Say you're playing a lawyer in a courtroom scene, and that's your drama that you're going for. Well, maybe you don't know all 12 laws that somebody might have broken or might have been innocent of, and you're trying to prove those to a jury. But what you do is you try and give your best argument that you can, and then you're going to roll dice according to skills and be able to actually let your lawyer do his job and actually win the case. So that's one thing where Savage Worlds really sets itself apart from a lot of other games, and I really appreciate that. Also, there are rules for travel over long periods of time, and finally, there's an optional wealth rule set that if you use that, you can just use a die to determine whether or not you can buy things. And I will admit, I am not the best at running systems and settings Savage Worlds is what I run, but I'm not the best at running settings that require wealth tracking. And I'm sure that Deadlands is a lot of fun when you're in East Texas University. They're a lot of fun when you're cash strapped and you have to try and figure out where you're going to get money to be able to eat dinner that next night. But I've never actually gotten around to it. And one thing I always fudge on this when my players make characters, and that is I almost always let them have a reasonable amount of equipment that they didn't have to pay for. Because in my mind, the characters didn't pop in. They weren't just created just now and have to pop in with $500 worth of gear and nothing left in their bank accounts. Chances are they've got $500 to their name. They can actually, unless you're playing Deadlands Noir, where everybody takes poverty as a hindrance. And that's where you can use setting rules and things like that to be able to make the system and the setting that you're playing a little more real or a little more fun. But we didn't play a role-playing game, in my opinion, to keep track of dollars and cents. So let's continue on and talk about allies. Now, allies are a big part in lots of games, and they could be they could be troops under your character's command. If you're playing like a Deadlands, like a cavalry group in Deadlands, you might have troops under your command, and you, even though your friends might be playing other members of the troop or people who are helping the troop, that cavalry unit, the rest of it is represented by I need to learn my military rank sizes as or unit sizes better. I've had it explained to me before, and I still keep messing it up. But I know it's not an army, and I know it's not a division or a brigade, or um, I know some of that breakdown, but I don't know all of it, and I don't know my numbers. But anyway, but maybe you have a group. There's loyal retainers in a fantasy setting or something. Or, like I said, maybe your character is a legendary character and you've advanced to a point that you have a sidekick. So maybe you're playing both characters. I don't know. But what happens though is that this is one place where, again, Savage Worlds kind of sets itself apart from other role playing games that I've played. And that is, as the game master, I'm going to hand the allied character cards to my players. And I'm going to try and hand them out in a way that makes sense. However, sometimes ways don't make sense, and so you just hand them randomly out and just ask the person who's the most capable role player at your table to take on the extras. Because sometimes you have extras who follow you around who are your allies. And remember that an extra is just someone they've got their toughness, and they can take one wound, and then they're out. So oftentimes you'll be using them in a battle or in some sort of a tactical way to help you out. But as the game master, you also have the veto power. So don't just let your players run the roughshod and say, "Oh, that looks like there might be a trap there. Let's let this NPC go try it." You can say, the NPC looks at you and says, "Are you joking? I'm not doing that," and sits down. So you now have to go try it. So you guys can help create, control, and track your own followers and non-player character allies. Or the players can do so. And you jot down their quick stats, and that's the nice thing again about Savage Worlds is that their stats are just put them down. And as a game master, you can even create them up on the fly. It was almost on the fly that we created Sir Roland last time, 2 times ago. But that's where we just took everything at a D6 and then modified a few things. And actually, because of the way we did it, we actually ended up with a balanced character. You just divide the allied extras among the players to control, and sometimes there's grunts or loyal retainers or other people who accompany your team on the adventure. And this allows the players to keep the control under what they're doing. And remember, it's the players, not the characters, who control the allies. So, and this can also give people who might not be in that scene a chance to still play somebody in the scene. So you could have a little fight going on in this room and with a villain and an extra and a player, and you can have one of your other players involved in that, or things like that. You can have people doing it. It actually kind of blunts the old adage of never separate the party, because in Savage Worlds you totally can, and it makes it so maybe someone's hero gets taken out and gets incapacitated. They can still run an extra and still stay involved at the table. The player can, and so that's really where it's nice. The allied personalities table can be helpful to add a little flavor, And these kind of impressions, um, can kind of give you a jumping off point for the way that character comes across. Excuse me. So, also, allies can advance, and there's rules in the advancement section on page 54 of the current Savage Worlds Adventure Edition that tell you about how to advance that character. And also, this gives a good way to track not only your allies' ammo, but on top of that, if you're tracking ammo, you can always adopt this system just for your characters in general. That they start out with very high, or the highest level is very high. High is the usual level. Low is below that, and out is under that. And I tend to like to do those kind of levels. You can do it after a fight, where it just dropped a level, or it, or you can have them, like if they roll a critical failure in the fight, maybe they've run out of ammo. Maybe that's what it is, and that could be helpful. So that can be helpful for your player characters as well. But because we want dramatic situations and keep somewhat realistic logistical problems of how do we keep these guys with ammo enough to fight the fight and win the war, but not have to bean count every bullet that is spent. I mean, if you're playing Deadlands Hell on Earth, maybe you do want to keep track of that, but that's because that's also, ammunition is also a form of currency in that game. So anyway, and the great thing about page 112, where these rules are really spelled out for allies, is that it gives you the stat block for soldier, which you can also find again in the bestiary below. But it also gives you the stat block for experienced soldier. So it shows you a logical way of advancing that soldier into the next level. And this is, again, all going back to how can we get the action to flow and just be having a great time. So those are my thoughts on allies, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on allies and the ways you might have used them. So comment below, and obviously, hey, if we like and subscribe, that'd be helpful. I mean, I think we've been around YouTube long enough that I don't have to ask every time, and if you hadn't been thinking about liking and subscribing, maybe you are now. But I'm grateful that you just come and spend the time with me. And remember that I do love you. I may not have met you yet, but I love you. And somebody out here in this world does love you. And the world is a better place because you're in it. So keep gaming for good, and keep building your role-playing game clubs. And feel free to reach out to me and ask me any questions you might have. My contact info is in the overall channel in the about section, and you can email me. Just make sure you're being open and telling your parents that you're emailing, and say, hey, I'm emailing this strange guy on YouTube, but he puts up good videos that have been helping me, but I just have a specific question. And if I don't have answers to it, I can also recommend checking out www.peginc.com and looking at their forums, because they have forums for Savage Worlds where certain things that aren't well spelled out in some of the books can totally be answered by people asking those questions before. So regardless, I want to thank you again for coming, and I look forward to our next time that we get together. So until then, this is Mason Emerson saying I'll catch you next time.